All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Seeley, and I am doing this as part of my honors project for my Earth Science class. So first of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I did before I came up with this topic. For the honors program, I went out into the community trying to find the perfect volunteer work to do for my hours. So I came across the Audubon, which I was talking to the volunteer coordinator, and she said my availability was perfect for working with the owls. And I was like, oh no, do you mean like the animal owl? She goes, oh no, that's just an acronym. They call them the old, wise, lazy, and senile, but don't worry, that's what they call themselves. They're a retired group that actually come to the Audubon every Tuesday and Thursday, and they do anything from painting walls, chopping down trees for projects, or building and grounds maintenance like I have been doing. So they introduced me to someone named Ray Carlson, he works with the beaver dams and the water flow at the Audubon. So at first I was hesitant because it was November, it was really cold, and we had to go into the ponds. So at first I was a little hesitant, but it was actually a really good experience. So this is Spatter Duck Outlet. As you can see, this is the upstream part of the pond. So the water actually goes through this. It's called a water control box. We use this to manage wildlife, keep invasive species managed as well, and flood control. So in October, we actually take boards out to lower the levels in the ponds because the animals need to be able to burrow into the mud there. So that's where we put the boards in. And yes, we have to go in there and dig everything out eventually. This is where the water comes out, and this is our main obstacle here. The beaver comes in every day and puts sticks, logs, leaves, all debris, and blocks up the water control box. And this is us actually in the water here. And yeah, so eventually I was like, hey, what I'm doing here is actually really important, this little thing that I'm doing, raking up leaves. He actually told me that this little thing that we do is actually preventing the Conowongo River from flooding. So I'm like, wow, that's actually a really big effect that I'm making just by doing this little thing. So this is how I came up with my topic here. So I just wanted to start off talking about the water cycle, just really brief. So here, I put little dots so I can follow around. My purple dot here is evaporation. So that is when the sun's energy hits the water, makes it vibrate and move, and the water molecules escape into the atmosphere, which is where condensation happens. And then precipitation happens when those water molecules get way too heavy for the clouds to handle, so they come down, and they eventually infiltrate into the ground, which is the black dot there, and they either go to water storage or they can get absorbed into the roots of plants for water uptake, and eventually use transpiration process, which is the process of plants where it takes it up the roots and it evaporates off of the surface of the plants, which is really cool. And it can also, the red dot here, it can do surface runoff. So that's really important that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So why it's important to keep the water cycle running properly is because only 3% of the water on Earth is fresh water, and of that 3%, only 1% is accessible. The rest are underground that we can't get to, or it is in glaciers. So there are a lot of human actions that are altering the water cycle and eventually causing consequences. I'm going to list just a few of them. I'm going to start with man-made structures. So first of all, dams. They are meant to prevent flooding, they provide irrigation to the lower areas of elevation, and they also generate electricity and promote navigation in the rivers as well. But it also breaks up the river into two separate areas. So they have their own consequences, which I'll talk about. So upstream, on the left side of the picture, there's a lot of growth of aquatic weeds because there's water stagnation as well as a lot of sedimentation happening and waterlogging in the land around it, which means that the ground is so saturated that it can't take any more water into it. And downstream, there is even more silt deposition as well as reduced water flow, which leads to a loss of land fertility in the end because it's not getting that fresh water stream. And if it malfunctions, it makes the floods even worse than they would be without. Also, levees, they can be natural or man-made. Of course, if they malfunction, it can lead to catastrophic damage, as well as it compresses all this water into this really thin space, so it increases the velocity of the water flow as well as rising it in the process. So next is deforestation. So trees' jobs are to plants are responsible for extracting groundwater from the soil and bringing it back up into the atmosphere, so that's a really important part of the water cycle, is to keep recycling the water. So in the Amazon, more than half of the water is contained in all of these plants, so if we get rid of them, there's no way for our water to get from underground back into our atmosphere to be recycled. And what would happen if trees were removed? It would turn into a lot drier climate, which would be awful for that ecosystem. Irrigation, so when we have to artificially water our plants at farms, we bring it out of our natural resources, which is causing our water tables to rise, and this is causing land fertility to go down, and it stunts plant growth as well, and it gives the runoff a lot more stuff to pick up, which I'll talk about a little later. Urbanization, this happens when the population increases, so we have to all cram into these cities, we have to pave roads, we have to cut down trees to make buildings. So the consequences of this is that we use more fossil fuels because there are so many people in that area, more runoff, which I'm talking about next, and water extraction for basic needs for all of those people. So finally, runoff, which is a really important part of this presentation. It is the excess water that flows down elevation, so the snow melts in the mountains, it comes down here, the water that we put out into our yards ends up in Chautauqua Lake, ends up into rivers and oceans. So urbanization and irrigation, the last two things I just talked about, are major contributors to polluting our runoff. So urbanization leads to overpaving, which means there's no porous land for the water to go in, as well as irrigation, giving pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers a chance to get into our waterways. And this has catastrophic things because even in our area, it's super common because I'm a lifeguard at Lakewood Beach, so we have to close down in August because of all the algae that is growing, and that is because of all the pesticides. It's from phosphates and nitrates that are from everyone's soaps, everyone's washing their cars, stuff like that. It all gets into the lakes. So it destroys aquatic habitats by making water cloudy. Excess nutrients cause algae blooms, and when these algae blooms decompose, they actually take up all of the oxygen in the water, which causes dead zones, like the one in Gulf of Mexico right now, that is actually the size of New Jersey. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, say that 10 times fast, said that agriculture and urban living is the reason for more than half of the pollution that has caused this action. So lastly, we have fossil fuels, which we combust to do everything that we do today. It traps infrared radiation in our atmosphere, which makes Earth's temperatures rise. That's just the short summary. I can't talk for that long. This increases evaporation as well as melts the ice in the polar caps, and it dramatizes climate change even more than what is already happening. So, what can we do? I wrote a couple of big things, like cutting down burning fossil fuels, as well as using more renewable sources of energy. Those are some big things that cost a lot of money, but it could happen. Some small things like planting trees, not fertilizing your lawn as much as is going on, disposing of waste properly so it doesn't end up in our wonderful waterways, as well as building smaller dams and not overpaving. So yeah, next time you think about the water cycle, consider yourself one of the most important parts. Happy Earth Day.
Thank you, Megan. questions about the water cycle for Megan.
Yeah, that was a fascinating presentation, and I'm wondering, after this experience in the research, do you feel optimistic about future change, pessimistic, or something else?
I definitely am optimistic because as I'm going through social media, I feel like there's a lot more awareness going on because of the media right now. And I don't know, I feel like my career is, I want to do something about this. So I feel like a lot of people are seeing this and they're sick of hearing about it. They're sick of like not caring about our world. So I feel like a lot of people will start changing by doing little things, and that could possibly lead to a lot bigger things.
I'm assuming you're an environmental science major?
Yeah, I'm in math and science right now, but going into environmental science, yeah.
So your experience at the Audubon, I like the way you put that together and expanded on it for us. What would you say to encourage more students, freshmen coming in next year, sophomore, rising up, to go out and have these hands-on experiences? You obviously had kind of an epiphany, an awakening that small project that you undertook had big impact.
Right.
So how would you encourage more students to roll up their sleeves and get in those ponds?
Well, the reason I did it was all because of the honors program. I wouldn't have gone out and looked for this opportunity if it wasn't for that. So I think I would encourage people to maybe make that a requirement for classes. I don't know, students probably won't like me for saying that, but I think that it's super important to not only get the knowledge in class, but really just getting your hands dirty, like you said, and doing something about it.
Well, if I can just make a comment, not really a question, but I think that we're always talking about how much that getting out in the community is an important part of the honors program, and we require the hours and we can fill those hours in different ways. And we're always talking about, should we bring the some sort of community engagement back into the honors program as a requirement. And I think that you made a really good case today about why that is important, and having that community engagement is something that honor students have not just liked in the past, but it's really changed them having that experience. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you.